When all is said and done, the one true, consistent predictor of success at very difficult things is grit. Detractors of this concept who are talented at something and have to hold on to their deep-seated belief that it really counts for something will always bring up one strange thing that scientists hate. Basketball. I'm dead serious. You can't be 5'3" and a professional basketball player. Those two things are mutually exclusive. But guess what? I'm 6'6", and I never became a good basketball player because I didn't believe I could be. I wasn't even planning on making a video today, but I just got fired up. So I saw a video by a psychologist who also wants to be a writer, and despite being a psychologist, the way that she denies the implications of positive psychology and the results that have been found in multiple studies about grit, the way that she denies this is to say that as she is 5 feet tall, she could be neither a ballerina nor a basketball player. But she had talent as a writer, so why not put her energy into that, something where success is so much more likely? Why build a life of frustration by putting her energy into something at which she didn't have the talent? Well, if you think that it's a safe bet that you're going to have success as a fiction writer, I have other news for you. But let's leave that for other videos. It's time to put a nail in the coffin of this horrible analogy. It's time to bury it. 1, there is no unchangeable physical trait that will prevent you from being a successful fiction writer. Writing happens in the mind, and guess what? The mind is really malleable. You cannot practice your way up to my height. You can absolutely practice your way into being better with words. If you get brain damage, other parts of your brain will adapt to take over for the part of the brain that no longer functions. People learn to walk again. People learn to write again, to speak again. You've seen them, like people struggle to do this, right? And come out the other end like strong and proud. But you don't think that you can, through effort, get better at writing descriptions? I know that on this channel, I put writing on like an unrealistically high pedestal, but if you truly think that it's harder to get your brain adapted to writing descriptions than to like relearning how to walk, I think you might need to like reevaluate your perspective on that. Number 2, unlike in sports, the rules of fiction are very loose and made to be broken. A sport is nothing more than a series of limitations, a game of any sort. In writing, you don't have to have the specific traits to perform the super specific tasks, or else you lose. If a person had to write in florid language, we would not know the names of Raymond Carver and Charles Bukowski. If you had to write deep, moment-to-moment, phenomenological explorations of how reality unfolds before us, nobody would read anything but Proust and maybe Henry James. The blossoming of reality that occurs when that Madeleine is nibbled, I mean, give up. If that's a requirement to writing fiction, the ability to do that, yeah. I mean, I'm just giving up. You aren't required to be able to meet. Like each of these writers fall short of any of the other writers in one regard or another. In basketball, you have to be able to shoot, rebound, or guard, or preferably all three. In writing, there are 1,000 different ways to be great. There are 1,000, or there is a way, there are as many paths to greatness as there are writers. The reason that there aren't just, like in a sport, 4 to 5 routes to success is because the rules of writing fiction are really there more for the writer than for anyone else. They are to keep you from unnecessarily like reinventing the wheel to do something mundane. And they are there to be broken so that you can show off once you've mastered something. Of course, Cormac McCarthy gets away with having no quotation marks or commas. He's Cormac McCarthy. He's earned it. Get everything else up to competent and you're fine. Number 3, remember that anything that you find particularly difficult in writing, that you feel like you're not good at, you get to work at it for as long as you want before you show it to anyone. In a lot of contemporary competitive online shooters, there is something called strafing or counter strafing, where you have to be able to move to the side, pause, like take your finger off of the movement key for just long enough that your crosshairs narrow down to increase your accuracy, take your shot, and move again. This is an extremely complicated skill to master. People spend hours practicing just this. Because when you make one mistake, you die. Now, what if instead of being able to make one mistake, you can make 100 mistakes, or 1,000, or 10,000, and only show the world the one time when you get it perfect? That is a matter of grit, not talent, and that is the world of the fiction writer. For as tough as I think sometimes that we have it, we get to perfect our art almost in total privacy and just show the world the very best of it. I started writing fiction as an undergrad. I was talented at certain aspects of it. I got attention and praise, and so I kept at it.
I wanted to include this comment from Paul R. Worthington in this video, but forgot during recording, so I'm inserting it here. It reads, "A few years ago, I watched a video where a writing professor spoke of how for a decade, with every class of new students, he could always tell right away who was a natural writer and who would never make it. There were always 1 to 3 students who seemed to have it, and the rest would never get it. So he'd focus his attention on the ones who would benefit, the few who were gifted. Then, more recently, he realized that all he was perceiving was that a few of the students had already been praised as writers and had mastered some of the very basics that the other students had not been exposed to. He changed his teaching to get everyone up to speed on these basics in the first few weeks, and by the end of the semester, there was no difference in the perceived innate talent of any of the students. He added that he felt so guilty about all the students he had failed for a decade, for whom he had compounded the issues they had no control over, instead of getting them over those first small speed bumps." This is what I was talking about using sports in my last video, directly applied to writing. Talent matters, but the perception of talent matters much more. It leads to support. It leads to practice. After taking Introduction to Creative Writing with this professor post-enlightenment, I would bet that 99% of the students who found success were the hardest workers. Thanks so much for this comment, Paul.
Years later, I went to get an MFA, and guess what? I wasn't nearly as talented as I thought I was. And yet, I still won a lot of awards. Why? Because these writers around me with incredible talent, and I have to call it that because I don't think that they practiced that much, would make one beautiful story a semester to have critiqued during workshop. I wrote innumerable stories and presented the best. The only time limit that you have is your lifetime. Within your lifetime, you get judged only by what you choose to show the public at large. You control how many reps you put in to get that perfect result by which you will be judged. You can brute force genius. Number 4, all of this adds up to grit being the most important trait. Can you handle rejection for as long as Bukowski did? Most people cannot. Can you handle writing multiple, complete novels as practice to eventually get that one gem that gets you attention? Most people cannot. Writing a novel takes a really long time. Can you see that as practice? Now, I am supposed to be humble, but I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. And I am a goddamn juggernaut when it comes to achieving my goals. I don't claim to be the most talented at anything, but I will brute force my way into creating my vision. And that, in my personal experience, has been so much more important than any small amount of extra talent that I have started with in any of my creative endeavors. In my MFA program, I had a couple of abilities, I think writing abilities that were a little bit uncommon that did get people's attention, but I looked around at writers who had so much more talent in things that get you literary praise. So am I watching their backs as they like disappear in the distance of literary success? No. Because almost none of them had the internal drive to continue to write when it wasn't being assigned to them, or to continue to write after they wrote one big thing and it didn't make a splash. The people who I do see out there are talented, but they are also workers who work for the sake of the work. You can catch up to the talented. You can pass them. And eventually, when you look back, you won't even see them because they will have turned away to pursue something with more external validation and utility. Maybe that's a good thing because honestly, this sometimes feels like insanity. But I guess I'm speaking to other crazy people. Side note, to me in basketball, that further proves my point. I was not good at it. I was not good at any sports. If you watch my previous video, you'll know that I was a year younger than everyone, very tall and not accustomed to my extremely fast growth rate, and very easily embarrassed, so I did not try. I lived way out in the country, and we had 2 television stations. I used to read a lot. I used to create a lot. At the time, did I appreciate living a half an hour away from town with 2 television stations? No, but I think it helped set a course for my life. One year for Christmas, I got a basketball hoop. And you're probably thinking, oh, and he's going to say that it sat in his garage and never put up. No, my parents put it up for me on a light post, and I used to spend a lot of time just shooting hoops. I mean, we had 2 television stations. This would be daily, and it wasn't focus practice. It was just, I would go out, I enjoyed shooting the basketball, I would shoot the basketball for hours. So I couldn't play basketball, but I could shoot free throws because I practiced. And that shows you the distinction. I was not good at basketball. I could not pass, I could not dribble without getting the ball taken away from me, I could not get under the net and rebound. But in gym class, when I was forced to play basketball with other people, the jocks would get, or play a game called Knockout, where you would eliminate everyone standing in a line as you would shoot baskets one at a time. The jocks would get furious because they would get beaten by someone who was terrible at sports. It was humiliating for them. This is what you control. Okay, but do you control it? What if you have no grit? What if your supply of tenacity is very low? You just give up quickly. Grit, like other traits, is granted to all of us in different amounts. If you remain unconscious to this, unless some outside factor causes you to develop it, it is very unlikely to change. But once you know about it, you can develop it, just like so much of what we talk about on here. Once you become aware of it, you can live consciously and you can increase your levels of grit. And that will help you succeed at everything else in life. And that clearly is a topic for another video. If it helps you to think of yourself as talented, by all means. If it keeps you putting one foot in front of the next because you feel like you've been blessed, don't let me take that from you. If it helps you to think of yourself as the underdog, cursed by fate, discounted, looked down upon, if it builds a rage in you and that rage fuels you to push on farther than anyone else, just so that you can see the shock and humiliation in their faces, like those jocks who I could beat at free throw competitions, hey, that works too. I see you. Petty recognizes petty. Whichever path you take, keep writing, keep reading, keep living life.